What happened when your mother's victim found you? The message appeared in my Facebook inbox at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was grading my third grade math tests with a glass of cheap wine. Asterisk Sarah Chen. We need to talk about your mother, asterisk. I stared at the profile photo, a man about my age with dark hair and serious eyes, standing in front of what looked like a commercial kitchen. Marcus Delacroix. The name meant nothing to me, but something about the message made my stomach clench. Mom had been dead for 3 months, and I thought I'd finally started sleeping through the night again. I think you have me confused with someone else, I typed back, then immediately regretted responding at all. Any reasonable person would have blocked him. 3 dots appeared instantly. He'd been waiting. Asterisk Elizabeth Chen, 1962 to 2024. Worked as a bookkeeper at Delacroix Family Bakery from 2007 to 2009. Stole $47,000 from my family's business account. Ring any bells? Asterisk. My wine glass slipped, red liquid spreading across Tommy Martinez's worksheet. The number felt like a punch to the chest, specific, deliberate, real. I grabbed paper towels with shaking hands, my mind racing back to 2009. I'd been 13 then, just starting 8th grade. Mom had quit her job at the bakery suddenly that fall, claiming the owners were difficult to work with. Within a month, we'd moved from our cramped apartment to a house with an actual yard. Family loan, she'd explained when I asked how we could suddenly afford it. Great Aunt Helen came through for us. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? Mom worked 2 jobs back then, always stressed about money, always telling me we couldn't afford new shoes or school trips. When things got better, I was just grateful. You're lying, I messaged back, though my hands were trembling. Asterisk check the Pierce County Court records. Case hashtag 2009 CV 3847. Delacroix Family Bakery versus Elizabeth Chen. We had to settle out of court because we couldn't afford a lawyer, asterisk. I minimized Facebook and opened a new browser window, my teacher's instincts kicking in, verify sources, check facts, don't believe everything you read. The Pierce County website loaded slowly on my laptop, the search function buried under 3 different menu tabs. When I finally found the case records, there it was. Black text on white background, as undeniable as gravity, asterisk Delacroix Family Bakery versus Elizabeth Chen, filed November 12, 2009. Civil action for theft and breach of fiduciary duty, asterisk. The settlement amount was redacted, but the case summary made my vision blur. Defendant allegedly misappropriated funds over a period of 18 months while serving as bookkeeper and financial manager for plaintiff's family business. My phone buzzed. Marcus had sent another message, asterisk the bakery was in our family for 3 generations. My grandfather started it in 1952. We lost everything because of what she did. Had to close permanently in 2010, asterisk. I googled Delacroix Family Bakery with numb fingers. The first result was a newspaper article from the Pierce County Tribune, beloved local bakery closes after 58 years. There was a photo of an older couple standing in front of empty display cases, their faces hollow with exhaustion. My college fund was in that business account, Marcus continued. Asterisk $23,000 my parents had saved since I was 5. I was supposed to start culinary school that January, asterisk. I stared at my laptop screen, at the math worksheets scattered across my coffee table, at the modest apartment I'd inherited along with Mom's life insurance money and savings account. Everything felt contaminated now, like I was sitting in a room full of stolen goods. What do you want from me? I finally typed. The response came immediately, asterisk to start with. An apology would be nice, asterisk. An apology. He wanted an apology for something my mother had done when I was in 8th grade, worried about algebra tests and whether Jake Morrison would notice my new haircut. The audacity of it made my face burn, even as guilt twisted in my stomach like a living thing. I was 13, I typed back. I didn't know anything about this. Asterisk, but you benefited from it. That house you grew up in? The one she bought in November 2009? I looked it up. $127,000 purchase price, paid in cash, asterisk. I felt sick. The house on Maple Street with its small garden and the blue bedroom where I'd spent my high school years, where Mom had helped me with college applications at the kitchen table. Where she'd made me soup when I had strep throat and celebrated when I got my teaching job. Your mom told my parents she needed the money for your medical bills, Marcus continued. Asterisk said you had some rare condition and insurance wouldn't cover the treatment. My dad actually felt sorry for her, asterisk. The lie was so elaborate, so cruel, that I had to put my laptop down and walk to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at myself in the mirror, Mom's dark eyes, her stubborn chin. What other lies had she told? How many people had she looked in the eye and manipulated while I was at home doing homework, completely oblivious? When I returned to the couch, there were 2 new messages waiting. Asterisk, I know this isn't your fault. But she's dead, and you're the only connection I have left to what happened, asterisk. Asterisk, my parents never recovered. Dad had a heart attack in 2012. The stress, the shame, losing the bakery that had been in our family for 60 years. Mom still works 2 jobs at 71 because they lost their retirement savings, asterisk. I found myself typing, how did you find me? Asterisk, your teaching license is public record. Sarah Chen, age 28, Lincoln Elementary. Plus you look just like her, asterisk. The casual way he tracked me down should have scared me, but instead I felt a strange sense of inevitability. Like this confrontation had always been coming, waiting in the shadows of my comfortable life. What happened to the court case? I asked. The settlement? Asterisk, your mother claimed she was broke. Said she'd spent all the money on your medical bills and could only pay back $8,000. Our lawyer said we could try to garnish her wages, but it would take years and cost more than we'd recover. My parents just wanted it over, asterisk. $8,000. Out of $47,000 stolen. I thought about the down payment on our house, the new car Mom had bought in 2010, the family vacation to San Francisco that summer. She paid back less than 20 cents on the dollar and moved on with her life while an entire family lost everything. I need time to process this, I typed. Asterisk, take all the time you need. I've been processing it for 15 years, asterisk. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to my upstairs neighbor's TV through the thin walls. My phone showed 17 ungraded math tests, a reminder about parent-teacher conferences next week, a text from my best friend about weekend plans. Normal life, continuing as if the foundation hadn't just cracked beneath my feet. At 1:30 a.m., I opened my laptop again and searched for Delacroix Family Bakery one more time. This time I found Marcus's personal Instagram account. Photo after photo of elaborate cakes, artisan breads, pastries that looked like small works of art. The captions told the story, still chasing the family dream, and saving up for that food truck, and someday. He'd never stopped trying to become the baker he was supposed to be. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the newspaper photo of Marcus's parents standing in their empty bakery, and my mother's face superimposed over the broken display cases. At 6 a.m., I gave up and made coffee with hands that still shook. The logical thing would have been to block Marcus and pretend this conversation never happened. Mom was dead, what was the point of dragging up old wounds? But as I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the furniture she'd bought and the comfortable life she'd built, I couldn't stop thinking about that $8,000. Less than what she'd spent on my senior year of high school alone. I called in sick to work and drove to the Pierce County Courthouse instead. The clerk, a tired-looking woman named Janet, helped me navigate the records system. Civil cases from 2009? Those should all be digitized now. What's the case number? 2009 CV 3847. She typed with practiced efficiency, then frowned. Huh. Says here there are additional sealed documents. Victim impact statements, financial records. You'd need to petition to have them unsealed, but... She looked at me carefully. What's your interest in this case? Elizabeth Chen was my mother. Janet's expression softened. Oh, honey. I'm sorry for your loss. But if you're looking to understand what happened, you might want to talk to Detective Rodriguez first. He worked financial crimes back then, might remember the case. Detective Miguel Rodriguez was pushing retirement, with gray hair and the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too much. He met me at a diner near the courthouse, sliding into the booth across from me with a steaming cup of black coffee. Elizabeth Chen, he said before I could even explain why I was there. I remember that case. Should have gone to trial, but the family couldn't afford to pursue it properly. The records say she only paid back $8,000. Rodriguez snorted. Your mother was smart. She'd already moved most of the money around by the time we got involved. Different accounts, cash purchases, probably some offshore stuff we could never prove. Made herself look judgment-proof on paper. But she wasn't broke. Hell no. We estimated she'd stolen closer to $60,000 when you factored in the check-kiting scheme and the fake vendor payments. The Delacroix only caught part of it. My stomach dropped. $60,000? Your mother had a gift for financial manipulation. She could make numbers dance better than anyone I'd seen. Rodriguez leaned forward. The really sick part? She convinced the Delacroix to give her access to their business credit line right before she disappeared. Maxed it out in 3 days. Another $15,000 they had to eat. I excused myself and barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. When I returned, Rodriguez was watching me with something that might have been sympathy. You had no idea, did you? I shook my head. She wasn't a one-time offender, Sarah. Can I call you Sarah? At my nod, he continued. We suspected she'd done this before, but the other victims never came forward. Too embarrassed, or too scared of legal costs. Your mother targeted small businesses, family operations that couldn't afford forensic accountants or extended litigation. Other victims? Rodriguez pulled out his phone and scrolled through old notes. Martinez Landscaping lost about $12,000 in 2006. Chen worked there for 8 months. Thompson's Auto Repair, maybe $20,000 in 2004. Always the same pattern, gain their trust, get access to the books, then systematically drain the accounts while creating fake expenses to cover the trail. The names hit me like physical blows. Martinez, I'd had 3 students with that last name over the years. How many times had I smiled at their parents during conferences, never knowing my mother had stolen their family's future? Why didn't anyone stop her? She was good at picking targets. Immigrants, working-class families, people who trusted easily and didn't have the resources to fight back. Plus she never stayed anywhere long enough for the damage to become obvious until after she was gone. Rodriguez finished his coffee and stood. I'm sorry you had to learn about this, but maybe it's time someone in the Chen family finally faced what Elizabeth did. Those families deserved better than they got. As I drove home, one thought kept repeating, how many others were there? That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Mom's old laptop, the one I'd inherited along with everything else. I'd never bothered to go through it before, but Detective Rodriguez's words echoed in my head, she was good at picking targets. The password was my birthday. Of course it was. Her email folders were meticulously organized, bills, personal, work history, banking. The work history folder made my blood run cold. 15 different companies over 20 years, each job lasting between 8 months and 2 years. Martinez Landscaping, Thompson's Auto Repair, Delacroix Family Bakery, they were all there, along with names Rodriguez hadn't mentioned. Golden Year Senior Care, 2011 to 2012. Riverside Community Center, 2013 to 2014. Little Lambs Daycare, 2015 to 2016. A senior care facility. A community center. A daycare. My hands shook as I opened her banking folder. She kept everything, spreadsheets tracking fake vendor accounts, screenshots of business bank balances, even a document titled Target Assessment that made me want to vomit. Under Martinez Landscaping, she'd written, family of 6, limited English, unlikely to pursue legal action. Under Little Lambs Daycare, church-affiliated, prioritizes forgiveness over prosecution. She'd researched these families. Studied their vulnerabilities like a predator. I scrolled deeper and found correspondence I wished I could unsee. Email chains with David Martinez from 2006, where she'd convinced him to add her to the business account because she could streamline the billing process. Messages with Ruth Thompson where she'd offered to work for below market rates because she believed in supporting local businesses. The calculated kindness in her words made my skin crawl. Then I found a folder labeled insurance claims and everything got worse. Mom had been filing false insurance claims for years. Fake medical bills for procedures I'd never had, property damage that never happened, even a workers' compensation claim from Thompson's Auto Repair for a back injury she'd invented. The insurance payouts totaled over $30,000 between 2004 and 2016. Every comfortable thing about my childhood was built on lies and theft. My phone buzzed. Marcus had sent another message. Asterisk, I know I'm pushing, but I can't stop thinking about our conversation. My parents are getting older, and my mom still blames herself for trusting your mother. If there's anything you can tell me about what really happened, asterisk. I stared at the screen, then at Mom's laptop displaying her methodical documentation of fraud. He deserved to know the truth, but how do you tell someone their losses were even worse than they thought? Before I could second-guess myself, I typed, asterisk, can we meet in person? I found some of my mother's files. It's complicated, asterisk. Asterisk tomorrow? I work at Meridian Restaurant downtown. I get off at 3 asterisk. Asterisk Meridian at 3:15. I'll be the one who looks like she hasn't slept, asterisk. I closed the laptop but couldn't bring myself to go to bed. Instead, I found myself Googling each business from Mom's work history. Golden Year Senior Care had closed in 2013 amid financial difficulties. Riverside Community Center had eliminated their after-school programs due to budget constraints. Little Lamb's Daycare was still open, but their website mentioned they were rebuilding after financial challenges. Each search result felt like finding another body. At midnight, I called my principal and requested a personal day. Then I opened Mom's laptop again and started making a list of every name, every amount, every detail I could find. If I was going to confess to Marcus tomorrow, I needed to understand the full scope of what my mother had done. By dawn, I counted 12 different victims and over $180,000 in documented theft. And I had a terrible feeling I'd barely scratched the surface. The Meridian restaurant sat in the heart of downtown's gentrified district, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. I arrived 20 minutes early and ordered coffee I couldn't afford to calm my nerves, Mom's printed files heavy in my messenger bag like evidence at a crime scene. Marcus appeared at exactly 3:15, still wearing his chef's whites, flour dusting his forearms. Up close, he looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from working double shifts and chasing impossible dreams. When he slid into the booth across from me, I caught the scent of yeast and vanilla that clung to his clothes. You look like hell, he said, not unkindly. I found her records. I pulled out the manila folder, my hands trembling slightly. All of them. His eyes fixed on the papers as I spread them across the small table. Bank statements, email printouts, that horrifying target assessment document with his family's name at the top. I watched his face change as he read his own father's words quoted back in Mom's clinical notes. Asterisk business struggling since 2008 recession. Trusts easily. Desperate for help with bookkeeping. Asterisk. Jesus Christ. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. She wrote this about my dad? There's more. I flipped to the financial spreadsheets. She didn't just take $47,000. It was closer to $75 when you include the credit line fraud and the fake vendor payments. Marcus stared at the numbers, his jaw working silently. A young couple at the next table laughed loudly at something on their phones, the sound jarringly normal in the space between us. My parents never knew about the credit line, he said finally. They thought that debt was from the business declining, not. He gestured helplessly at the papers. Detective Rodriguez said she was systematic about it. She'd identify vulnerabilities and exploit them. I pulled out another sheet. She documented everything like it was a business plan. What else did you find? This was the part I'd been dreading. 11 other families. Maybe more. Marcus looked up sharply. 11? Martinez Landscaping lost $12,000 in 2006. Golden Year Senior Care, that's an assisted living facility, went under in 2013 after she stole from their operating fund. My voice caught. Little Lamb's Daycare, where they take care of kids whose parents can't afford regular childcare. She stole money meant for their meal program. A daycare? Marcus's face had gone pale. She stole from kids? I nodded, hating myself for being the messenger. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, had to eliminate breakfast service for 6 months because of budget shortfalls. I found the emails where my mother convinced her to consolidate their accounts for better interest rates. Marcus pushed back from the table like the papers were radioactive. How much total? From what I can document. At least $180,000. But Detective Rodriguez thinks there were victims who never came forward. $180,000. He said it like he was testing how the words felt. From families just trying to make it. I watched him process the scope of it, saw the exact moment when shock shifted into something harder. His hands clenched on the table's edge, knuckles white against the dark wood. She kept all of this? Like trophies? I think she kept records in case she needed leverage later, or to remember which lies she'd told to whom. There are backup files going back 20 years. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at a photo I printed from the Golden Years website. Elderly residents gathered around a piano that had probably been sold to cover the losses my mother had caused. The thing that kills me, he said eventually, is how proud you were of her at the funeral. I blinked, startled. You were at Mom's funeral? Back row. I needed to see for myself that she was really gone. His eyes met mine across the table. You gave a speech about how she'd worked so hard to give you opportunities, how she'd sacrificed everything for your future. And I sat there thinking about my dad's heart attack, about my mom cleaning office buildings at 71, about how my little sister had to give up dance classes because we couldn't afford them anymore. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I know. That's what makes this so fucked up. He leaned forward. She destroyed all these families, and you got to be the grateful daughter who never questioned where the money came from. The accusation hung between us like a blade. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I'd been a child who trusted her mother, but the words felt hollow. How do you justify a comfortable life built on other people's suffering, even if you didn't know? You're right, I said quietly. I benefited from every dollar she stole. Marcus's expression softened slightly, as if my admission had taken some wind out of his anger. What are you going to do with all this? I don't know. I gathered the papers with shaking hands. Turn it over to police? Try to contact the other families? I keep thinking about that daycare, about kids going without breakfast because of what she did. The statute of limitations has probably run out on most of it. Maybe. But they deserve to know the truth, don't they? That it wasn't their fault, that they weren't bad with money or unlucky, they were targeted. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then, my parents still blamed themselves. Dad thinks he should have caught it sooner, Mom thinks she was stupid for trusting a bookkeeper. They've carried that shame for 15 years. I thought about the house on Maple Street, about Mom's life insurance payout sitting in my savings account, about the comfortable teaching salary that had never felt quite enough until I'd inherited her nest egg. How much did your family lose total? I asked. Including the credit line, the opportunity costs, everything? You want an itemized breakdown of how your mother destroyed my family's life? Yes. I do. He studied my face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether this was genuine or some kind of sick curiosity. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him, because he pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. 75,000 from the business accounts, like you said. 15,000 on the credit line. But then there's the stuff that's harder to calculate. Dad had to sell our delivery truck for 20 grand less than it was worth because we needed cash immediately. Mom liquidated her 401k and took a penalty, another 8,000 gone. The building lease we couldn't break cost us 12,000 in penalties. He was reading from notes he'd apparently kept for years, a precise accounting of loss that made my chest tight. Then there's my college fund, 23,000. My sister Emma's dance studio tuition, paid through 2010, 4,000 we couldn't get back. Dad's medication costs went up after the heart attack, and without the business insurance. He looked up at me. You want me to keep going? Please. The bakery equipment we had to sell at auction brought in maybe 30 cents on the dollar. Industrial mixers, ovens, display cases my grandfather had maintained for decades. Probably another 40,000 in losses there. Mom had to take a payday loan to cover Dad's hospital bills. We're still paying interest on money we borrowed because of what your mother stole. I was doing the math in my head, and the total was staggering. Over $150,000 just from your family. That's not counting the intangibles. Dad never worked again after the heart attack. Mom's been cleaning offices for 15 years instead of running the front counter at our bakery. Emma's 32 now and still talks about the dance career she gave up. And me. He gestured at his chef's whites. I'm 28 years old making prep cook wages because I never got the training I was supposed to have. What would you have done? If she hadn't stolen the money? Culinary Institute of America. 2-year program, then probably work in Seattle or Portland for a few years, learn from real chefs. Come back here and reopen the bakery with modern equipment, maybe expand into catering. His voice grew quiet. Dad and I used to plan it out on Sunday afternoons. He'd teach me the old recipes, I'd bring in new techniques. Keep the family tradition alive. Instead, he was stuck making salads and prep work at a chain restaurant, his dreams as displaced as his family's legacy. Marcus, I want to make this right. How? You going to give me 15 years back? Get my dad's heart working properly again? No, but... I took a deep breath. My mother left me $127,000. Her life insurance, savings, investment accounts. Money that rightfully belongs to the family she robbed. His eyes widened. You're talking about giving away your inheritance? I'm talking about returning stolen property. That's not how inheritance law works, Marcus said, but his voice had changed, less angry, more cautious. Legally, that money is yours. Legally, maybe. But morally? I pulled out my phone and showed him my banking app. Look at this. Mom's life insurance paid out $75,000 in January. Her savings account had another $31,000. Investment portfolio worth $21,000. Every dollar came from money she stole. Marcus stared at the screen like it might bite him. You're serious about this? Dead serious. The question is how to do it right. I've been thinking about this since 3 a.m., lying awake doing calculations. Your family alone is owed at least $150,000, but there are 11 other victims we know about. If I divide the inheritance equally, that's like 10 grand per family. It won't even cover what most of them lost. I know. But it's something. And maybe. I hesitated, then plunged ahead. Maybe there's more money hidden somewhere. Detective Rodriguez said she was good at moving assets around. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with those dark eyes. Why would you do this? You could just walk away, pretend this conversation never happened. Live your comfortable life. The question hit deeper than I expected. Why was I sitting here offering to bankrupt myself for strangers? 3 days ago, I'd been a normal teacher with a modest inheritance and weekend plans. Because I can't unknow what I know now, I said finally. Every time I spend her money, I'll be thinking about Mrs. Patterson cutting breakfast programs, or your dad's heart attack, or some elderly person losing their savings. I'll never be able to enjoy anything built on that foundation. That's a nice sentiment, but you'd be giving up your security. What happens when you need a new car, or want to buy a house, or have kids someday? I'll figure it out the way most people do, with my actual income and honest money. I gathered the papers into a neat stack. Besides, keeping money she stole feels like being complicit after the fact. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, absently straightening the salt and pepper shakers. My parents would never accept charity. It's not charity. It's restitution. Same thing to them. They're proud people, Sarah. Dad worked 70 hours a week at that bakery from the time he was 16 until your mother destroyed everything. Taking handouts would kill what's left of his dignity. This was the complication I hadn't anticipated. So what do you suggest? I don't know yet. Maybe if it came from some kind of official source? A victim's compensation fund or something? An idea started forming. What if we made it official? Set up an actual foundation, hire lawyers to research all the cases, make formal restitution offers through legal channels? That would cost a fortune in legal fees. Maybe. Or maybe we find a lawyer who specializes in victims' rights, someone who'd take the case on contingency or pro bono. I pulled out my notebook and started writing. We document everything, contact all the victims, file formal complaints with the state attorney general. Make it legitimate. Marcus watched me scribble notes with something that might have been hope. You're talking about a major investigation. It could take months, maybe years. I'm not going anywhere. My teaching contract runs through June, and I can't think of anything more important to do with my summer vacation than tracking down the families my mother destroyed. The statute of limitations doesn't matter for civil restitution. And even if we can't get criminal charges, at least these families would know the truth. Know that someone finally acknowledged what was done to them. I looked up from my notes to find Marcus staring at me with an unreadable expression. What? You really look like her, you know. Same eyes, same determined expression when you're concentrating. He paused. But this is the first time that resemblance doesn't make me want to punch something. I'll take that as progress. Don't get me wrong, I'm still angry as hell about everything that happened. But you're not her. He gestured at the papers between us. She would never have shown me these files. No, she would have burned them and moved to another state. Probably. Marcus pulled out his own phone and opened the Notes app. Okay, if we're really doing this, I have contact information for some of the other families. My parents stayed in touch with the Martinezes after everything happened, shared misery, I guess. The next morning, I sat in my car outside Martinez Landscaping at 7 a.m., watching workers load equipment into weathered trucks. The business had survived my mother's theft, but barely. The building looked tired, peeling paint, patched concrete, a hand-painted sign that had seen better decades. Marcus had given me David Martinez's phone number, but calling felt like an ambush. How do you open that conversation? Hi, my dead mother stole from you 15 years ago, want to talk about it? Instead, I decided on the direct approach. Show up, introduce myself, hope I didn't get thrown off the property. A man in his 50s emerged from the office trailer, keys jingling as he locked the door. Salt and pepper hair, work boots worn smooth, the careful movements of someone whose back had seen too many hard years. This had to be David Martinez. Excuse me, I called, stepping out of my car. Are you Mr. Martinez? He turned, his expression shifting to polite wariness when he saw a stranger approaching his business at dawn. That's me. You looking for landscaping work? No, sir. I'm Sarah Chen. I think you knew my mother, Elizabeth. The change was instant. His face went rigid, one hand moving reflexively to his chest like he was checking his heartbeat. For a moment, I thought he might turn and walk away without a word. Elizabeth Chen is dead, he said finally. Yes, sir. 3 months ago. I'm sorry to bother you this early, but I found some documents, and I think you deserve to know what really happened in 2006. David studied my face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. You look just like her. Same lying eyes. The accusation stung, even though I'd expected it. I'm not here to lie to you, Mr. Martinez. I'm here because my mother documented everything she stole, and the amount was larger than what you reported to police. Documented? His voice cracked slightly. She kept records? I pulled out the manila folder, the same one I'd shown Marcus yesterday. Spreadsheets, emails, even notes about how she planned to manipulate your family. She stole $12,000 that you know about, but there was another $8,000 in fake vendor payments you never caught. David's face went ashen. Behind him, one of his workers called out in Spanish, asking if everything was okay. He waved them off without taking his eyes from mine. Why are you telling me this? Elizabeth is dead. What's the point now? Because I have money that belongs to you. Her life insurance, savings account, it all came from the family she robbed. I want to make restitution. Restitution. He said the word like it tasted bitter. You think money fixes what she did to my family? No, sir. But it's better than letting her keep stealing from you even after death. Something in that phrase seemed to hit him. His shoulders sagged slightly, and for the first time, he looked more tired than angry. Come inside, he said quietly. Maria should hear this too. The office trailer was cramped but immaculate, every invoice filed, every surface clean. Family photos covered one wall, children, grandchildren, quinceañeras, and graduations. A life built despite the obstacles my mother had thrown in their path. Maria Martinez looked up from her computer when we entered, her smile fading when she saw my face. She said something rapid in Spanish to her husband, and he responded in the same language. I caught Elizabeth Chen and saw her flinch. This is Sarah, David said in English. Elizabeth's daughter. She says she has information about what really happened. Maria's eyes narrowed. Your mother cost us our house. We had to move in with my sister for 2 years because of what she did. I spread the documents on their desk, watching Maria's expression change as she read her own husband's words reflected in my mother's clinical notes. Asterisk immigrant family, limited legal resources, will prioritize family stability over prosecution. Asterisk. Dios mío, Maria whispered. She wrote this about us? She researched all her targets, I said. Studied your vulnerabilities, planned how to exploit your trust. And she stole more than you knew about, 20,000 total. David sank into his chair like I'd punched him. 20,000? But the police said. The police only found what she wanted them to find. She was careful about moving money around, creating fake paper trails. You never had a chance of recovering the full amount because she hid most of it. Maria's hand shook as she flipped through the pages. Look at this, David. She has our children's names here. Emma, age 12, wants to be a veterinarian. Carlos, age 8, learning guitar. I leaned forward. She used personal information to make herself seem trustworthy, didn't she? Asked about your kids, remember details about their interests? She brought Carlos a toy truck once, David said hollowly. Said she saw it and thought of him. Made us feel like family. That's how she operated. She made herself indispensable, then used her gratitude against you. I pulled out my checkbook. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, I want to return what she stole. With interest. We don't want your money, Maria said sharply. It won't bring back what we lost. Maybe not. But it might help Carlos with veterinary school, or cover some of those medical bills I see stacked on your desk. David followed my gaze to the pile of invoices marked past due and rubbed his temples. Even if we wanted to accept this, how do we know it's legitimate? Could be another scam. Because this time, you have all the documentation. Everything she did, every dollar she took, every lie she told, it's all here. I stood up and placed my business card on the desk. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to let a lawyer verify everything, make sure it's legal and binding. A lawyer costs money we don't have, Maria pointed out. I'll pay for the lawyer. And for any other families who want to pursue restitution. I met their eyes. My mother left me $127,000. Money that rightfully belongs to the people she robbed. I'd rather see it go to Carlos's college fund than sit in my account like a monument to her crimes. David and Maria exchanged a long look across their cramped office, having one of those wordless conversations that couples develop after decades together. Finally, David turned back to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. There's something you should know, he said slowly. Your mother didn't just steal money from us. My stomach clenched. What do you mean? After everything came out, after we realized what she'd done, we got a call from Immigration Services. Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. Someone had reported us for employing undocumented workers. But you didn't. No, we didn't. All our employees have proper documentation. But the investigation tied up our business for 8 months. We couldn't bid on new contracts, lost 3 major clients who didn't want to deal with the scrutiny. David's hands curled into fists. Cost us another $40,000 in lost revenue, plus $15,000 in legal fees to prove our innocence. The room felt like it was spinning. You think my mother made that call? Who else knew enough about our business to make specific accusations? The anonymous tip mentioned employee names, work schedules, client locations. Maria pulled out a thick folder from her desk drawer. We kept everything from the investigation. I said the tipster claimed to be a concerned former employee with detailed knowledge of illegal hiring practices. I thought about Mom's target assessment notes, how she'd written limited English, unlikely to pursue legal action next to their family name. The cruelty of it made my hands shake. She wasn't just stealing from you. She was systematically destroying your business. The worst part? David stood up and walked to the window overlooking his modest fleet of trucks. We actually defended her at first. When the police started asking questions about missing money, we told them Elizabeth was trustworthy, that there had to be some mistake. Right up until they showed us the bank records. She played us perfectly, Maria added. Made us feel guilty for suspecting her, even when the numbers didn't add up. Said she was working extra hours to help us catch up on bookkeeping, staying late out of loyalty to our family. I pulled out my notebook and started writing down the new figures. $20,000 in direct theft, plus $40,000 in lost contracts, plus $15,000 in legal fees. The Martinez family hadn't lost $20,000, they'd lost $75,000. There's more, David said quietly. After everything happened, Carlos started having problems at school. Kids heard their parents talking about the investigation, started saying we were criminals. He got in 3 fights that year defending our family's name. And Emma gave up her dream of veterinary school, Maria continued. Said she wanted to study business instead, learn how to protect the family from people like your mother. She's an accountant now, makes good money, but it's not what she wanted. I set down my pen and looked at these people my mother had systematically destroyed, not just financially, but emotionally, socially, professionally. Their children's dreams had been collateral damage in her calculated theft. The restitution amount just tripled, I said. $75,000, plus interest, plus compensation for what your children lost. We told you, we don't want charity, Maria said, but her voice lacked conviction now. It's not charity. It's justice, 15 years too late. I stood up and gathered my papers. I'm going to find a lawyer today. Someone who specializes in victim compensation. And I'm going to make sure every family she destroyed gets the same offer. David turned from the window. How many others are there? At least 11 that I found so far. But after hearing about the immigration tip, I'm wondering what other kinds of sabotage she committed that never made it into police reports. The look that passed between David and Maria told me I was about to find out. There was the fire, Maria said quietly, her hands folding and unfolding in her lap. At the Thompsons' auto shop. My blood went cold. What fire? David returned to his chair, moving like a man who'd aged years in the span of our conversation. March 2005, about 6 months after Elizabeth started working there. Electrical fire in the office, destroyed all their financial records going back a decade. Insurance barely covered the building repairs, nothing for the lost documentation. Ruth Thompson called me crying, Maria continued. Said they'd lost track of which customers still owed money, which suppliers they owed. 20 years of business relationships, gone. They had to start over from memory. I felt sick. You think my mother set that fire? The fire investigator said it started near the office computer, David said carefully. Faulty wiring in a 40-year-old building, that was the official ruling. But the timing was suspicious. Elizabeth had been pushing the Thompsons to digitize everything, said their paper filing system was inefficient. She convinced Ruth to put all the important documents in one central location, Maria added. For easier scanning, she said. Everything in metal filing cabinets right next to the computer setup. The methodical nature of it made my skin crawl. Destroy the evidence, then claim ignorance about the missing money. Ruth found out about the embezzlement 3 months later, but without the original invoices and bank statements, she couldn't prove how much was stolen or when it started. David pulled out his phone and scrolled through old contacts. She never recovered. Had to sell the business in 2006 for maybe half what it was worth. I wrote down another name, Ruth Thompson. Another family destroyed with surgical precision. Is Mrs. Thompson still alive? Lives in Sunset Manor now. Her son Jimmy visits her twice a week. Maria's expression softened. She still talks about that auto shop like it was yesterday. Remembers every customer's name, what kind of car they drove, which ones never paid their bills. Dementia? Early stages. But her memory of the business is crystal clear. It's everything after 2005 that gets fuzzy for her. An idea started forming. Would she talk to me? If I explained who I was and why I was there. David and Maria exchanged another look. Ruth has good days and bad days, David said slowly. But she might remember details about Elizabeth that never made it into police reports. Things that seemed innocent at the time. Could you call her son? Ask if he'd be willing to meet? Jimmy Thompson's been bitter about what happened for 20 years, Maria warned. His mother lost everything she'd worked for because some bookkeeper emptied the business accounts. He might not be receptive to Elizabeth Chen's daughter showing up with questions. Then I won't mention my last name when you call. Just say a researcher is looking into financial crimes from that period, trying to help victims get compensation. David hesitated, thumb hovering over his phone. You sure you want to open this can of worms? The more you dig into what your mother did, the worse it's going to get. It can't get worse than knowing she documented her crimes like a serial killer keeping trophies. It can, Maria said quietly. Trust me, it can always get worse. But David was already dialing. Jimmy? It's David Martinez. Listen, I know this sounds strange, but there's someone here who might be able to help your mother get some compensation for what happened at the shop. As he talked, I stared at my growing list of victims and dollar amounts. 12 families now, with losses totaling over $400,000. My mother's $127,000 inheritance wasn't going to come close to making everyone whole. Which meant I needed to find her other assets, the money Detective Rodriguez suspected she'd hidden offshore, the properties she might have purchased under fake names, the safety deposit boxes full of cash that people like her always seemed to maintain. My comfortable life as a small-town teacher was about to become a full-time investigation into the crimes of a woman I'd loved and trusted for 28 years. And I was terrified of what else I might find. The call with Jimmy Thompson lasted 15 minutes, and I watched David's face grow more troubled with each passing moment. When he finally hung up, he looked at me with something approaching pity. He'll meet with you, David said slowly. But there's something else you need to know first. Jimmy's been tracking your mother's activities for years. My pen stopped moving across the notepad. Tracking her? After the auto shop went under, he became obsessed with finding Elizabeth. Hired a private investigator in 2007, spent his inheritance trying to prove she'd committed arson. David rubbed his temples. Jimmy found things the police missed. Maria leaned forward. He discovered she'd taken out a business insurance policy on Thompson's auto just 2 months before the fire. Listed herself as a key employee and your family as beneficiaries if something happened to the business. The notebook slipped from my hands. She insured their business and named herself as a beneficiary? $25,000 policy. Paid out 6 weeks after the fire, right around the time you moved to the house on Maple Street. David's voice was gentle, but the words hit like hammers. Jimmy has copies of everything, the policy application, the payout records, even photos of Elizabeth signing the paperwork. I thought about our sudden move in late 2005, how Mom had explained it as a lucky break on a rent-to-own deal. How she'd been so excited about having a real yard, a place where I could have friends over without being embarrassed. There's more, Maria said quietly. Jimmy found similar insurance policies connected to 3 other businesses where Elizabeth worked. All filed within months of her starting employment, all paying out after accidents or unexpected closures. The room started to spin. She was systematically destroying businesses and collecting insurance money? Golden Years Senior Care, David read from his phone notes. Fire in the medication storage room, 2013. Little Lambs Daycare, kitchen equipment failure and food poisoning outbreak, 2016. Riverside Community Center, vandalism and theft of computer equipment, 2014. Each incident felt like a physical blow. The food poisoning at the daycare, kids got sick. 12 children hospitalized with salmonella. Health department shut them down for 6 months while they investigated. Maria's voice cracked. Those were babies, Sarah. 2 and 3 years old. I ran to their small bathroom and dry heaved over the toilet, my mother's smiling face flashing through my mind. The woman who'd made me chicken soup when I was sick had poisoned toddlers for insurance money. When I returned, David was pouring coffee from a thermos with hands that shook slightly. Jimmy's meeting us at Sunset Manor at 2 o'clock. Mrs. Thompson has physical therapy until then, but her son says afternoons are usually her best time for remembering details. What should I expect? Ruth's in her 80s now, but when she's lucid, she remembers everything about that auto shop. Customer names from 30 years ago, which mechanics called in sick on specific dates, how much she paid for parts in 1987. David paused. She also remembers exactly what Elizabeth said and did in those final months before the fire. And Jimmy? Maria and David exchanged another look. Jimmy Thompson is a 45-year-old man whose mother lost her life's work to your mother's schemes. He spent 20 years researching financial fraud cases, trying to build a pattern that would convince prosecutors to reopen the investigation. He's going to hate me. Probably. But he might also be the key to finding your mother's other victims. David stood up and grabbed his keys. Jimmy found connections between Elizabeth and cases in 3 different counties. If even half of what he suspects is true, your $127,000 inheritance is going to look like pocket change. As we drove across town in David's work truck, I tried to process the magnitude of what I was learning. My mother hadn't just been a thief, she'd been a one-woman disaster factory, systematically destroying small businesses and collecting payments from multiple angles. Embezzlement, insurance fraud, possibly arson, definitely food tampering. David, I said as we pulled into Sunset Manor's parking lot. When you found out about the theft, did my mother seem surprised? Scared? That's what was so disturbing. When the police showed up with the bank records, Elizabeth seemed almost relieved. Like she'd been waiting for someone to catch her. He turned off the engine. She had her lawyer's number memorized, had already moved most of the stolen money out of state, knew exactly which assets were protected from seizure. She'd done this before. Many times, I think. Your mother wasn't a desperate woman who made a bad choice, she was a professional criminal who'd perfected her methods over decades. And I was about to meet the one person who might be able to prove it. Jimmy Thompson was waiting for us in Sunset Manor's lobby, a manila folder thick as a phone book clutched in his weathered hands. He looked like a man who'd spent 20 years carrying a grudge, hollow cheeks, prematurely gray hair, the kind of intense stare that made me want to apologize before I'd even introduced myself. You must be the researcher, he said, standing as we approached. His handshake was firm enough to bruise. David says you're looking into financial crimes from the 2000s. I glanced at David, who gave me an almost imperceptible nod. We'd agreed to ease into my connection to Elizabeth rather than lead with it. I'm Sarah. I've been investigating a pattern of embezzlement cases targeting small businesses. The partial truth felt safer than the whole one. Your mother's case keeps coming up as a potential link to other incidents. Jimmy's laugh was bitter. Potential link? Lady, Elizabeth Chen was running a one-woman crime syndicate. I've got documentation proving she destroyed at least 8 businesses between 2003 and 2016. 8. My list had 12 families, but apparently Jimmy had found different victims entirely. Would you be willing to share what you found? Depends. Who's paying for this research? His eyes narrowed. Because if this is some insurance company trying to minimize payouts, you can walk right back out that door. No insurance company. I'm using personal funds to research victim compensation possibilities. Another partial truth that made my stomach clench. Jimmy studied my face for a long moment, then seemed to reach some internal decision. Come on. Mom's waiting in the activity room. Fair warning, she's going to ask you a lot of questions. She doesn't trust easily anymore. Ruth Thompson sat in a wheelchair by the window, a crocheted blanket across her knees despite the warm afternoon. At 83, she was still sharp-eyed and alert, her silver hair neatly combed and her floral dress pressed. When we approached, she looked me up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who'd spent decades evaluating customers and employees. You're here about Elizabeth, she said before anyone could introduce me. Jimmy told me someone was finally taking interest in what that woman did. Yes, ma'am. I'm trying to understand the scope of her activities. Scope? Ruth's voice rose slightly. She destroyed my business, ruined my family's legacy, and probably killed my husband with the stress of losing everything we built over 40 years. Is that scope enough for you? The raw pain in her voice made me flinch. Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry for what happened to your family. Sorry doesn't pay bills or bring back the dead. She gestured toward an empty chair. Sit down. If you want to understand Elizabeth Chen, you need to hear exactly how she operated. I sat, pulling out my notebook while Jimmy opened his thick folder on a nearby table. Elizabeth started working for us in August 2004, Ruth began, her voice taking on the precise cadence of someone who'd told this story many times. Seemed like a godsend, organized, efficient, asked intelligent questions about our filing system. Said she wanted to modernize our bookkeeping, bring us into the digital age. What was your first impression of her? Trustworthy. She had references from 3 previous employers, all glowing recommendations. Showed up 15 minutes early every day, stayed late without being asked, even brought coffee for the mechanics sometimes. Ruth's mouth twisted. Course, we found out later those references were fake phone numbers that went straight to her accomplices. Jimmy looked up from his papers. I tracked down the actual businesses she claimed to have worked for. 2 had never heard of Elizabeth Chen, and the 3rd had fired her for suspected theft but couldn't prove it. She spent the first 6 months gaining our complete trust, Ruth continued. Organized our files, updated our customer database, even helped my husband negotiate better rates with parts suppliers. We started thinking of her as family. When did things change? Looking back, the changes were subtle. She convinced us to switch banks, said the new one offered better business accounts. Had us consolidate multiple accounts into one for easier management. Started handling all the vendor payments herself because she was more efficient than the old system. I wrote furiously, recognizing the same pattern from the other victims. Did you notice money going missing immediately? That's the clever part, Jimmy interjected. She didn't take large amounts all at once. 500 here, 800 there, always with plausible explanations. Emergency parts order, equipment repair, tax payment. By the time we realized what was happening, she'd been stealing for over a year. Ruth nodded grimly. Then came the fire in March 2005. Lost every financial record we had, customer accounts, vendor contracts, tax documents going back 20 years. Elizabeth was so helpful afterward, working overtime to reconstruct everything from memory. Except she was reconstructing it to hide her theft, Jimmy added. Created fake invoices, adjusted customer balances, made it look like the missing money had been legitimate business expenses that went up in smoke. The insurance investigation was a nightmare, Ruth said quietly. They treated us like criminals, suggested we'd set the fire ourselves to cover up financial problems. Meanwhile, Elizabeth played the loyal employee, telling investigators how dedicated we were, how the fire was obviously an electrical accident. My pen had stopped moving. She defended you to the investigators? Oscar-worthy performance. Brought them coffee, answered their questions, even cried when they asked about losing all those records. Ruth's eyes hardened. Found out later she'd taken out a business interruption policy on our shop 2 months before the fire. $25,000 paid directly to her as key employee compensation. The methodical nature of it made my hands shake. She planned the fire months in advance. Oh, it gets better, Jimmy said, flipping through his folder. I found building inspection records from February 2005. Someone called in an anonymous tip about electrical problems in our office. City inspector came out, found some minor code violations, recommended upgrades. Let me guess, Elizabeth volunteered to handle the electrical work? Bingo. Hired her cousin's electrical company to do the repairs. Except the business license was fake, the electrician was probably an accomplice, and instead of fixing problems, they created the conditions for an electrical fire. Ruth's voice cracked slightly. She hugged me at my husband's funeral in 2007. Said she was so sorry for our losses, asked if there was anything she could do to help. I actually thanked her for being the one bright spot during those terrible years. The folder Jimmy spread across the table contained horrors I wasn't prepared for. Police reports, insurance claims, hospital records, a 20-year paper trail of my mother's systematic destruction that made the embezzlement look like a warm-up act. Elizabeth didn't just steal money, Jimmy said, pulling out a thick stack of medical records. She poisoned people. My notebook fell to the floor. What? Golden Year Senior Care, 2013. 12 residents hospitalized with severe food poisoning over a 6-week period. Health Department investigation found traces of cleaning chemicals in the kitchen prep area. His finger traced down a toxicology report. Someone had been systematically contaminating the food supply. Ruth leaned forward in her wheelchair. I remember that case. It was all over the news. 3 of those poor souls died. 3 people died? The words came out as a whisper. Dorothy Hansen, age 87. Frank Kowalski, age 91. Maria Santos, age 79. Jimmy's voice was flat, clinical. All 3 had compromised immune systems. The chemical poisoning pushed them over the edge. I thought about the elderly residents I'd seen in the photos on Golden Year's website, people who'd entrusted their final years to a facility my mother was systematically destroying. Did the police investigate Elizabeth specifically? She'd quit 2 weeks before the first incident, citing family health issues. Perfect alibi. Jimmy pulled out another document. But I found the insurance policy she'd taken out on the facility's operation. $50,000 payout for loss of business due to health violations. The kitchen contamination wasn't random, Ruth added. Jimmy showed me the timeline. Elizabeth had access to the food prep area for 18 months, long enough to study the residents' routines, medical conditions, which ones would be most vulnerable to additional health stress. My mother had murdered 3 elderly people to collect insurance money. The woman who'd taught me to bake cookies and helped me with science fair projects had calculated exactly how much chemical contamination would be fatal to senior citizens. There's more, Jimmy continued, flipping to a section marked Little Lamb's Daycare. The salmonella outbreak that hospitalized 12 children? Health department found the contamination source in the breakfast prep area, specifically in the milk storage refrigerator. But kids were covered from that one, right? I was grasping for some limit to her cruelty. Most of them. But 2-year-old Kevin Patterson was in intensive care for 6 days. His liver is permanently damaged. Jimmy's eyes met mine. Kid's going to need medical monitoring for the rest of his life because someone deliberately poisoned his breakfast milk. I ran to the bathroom again and this time actually vomited, my body rejecting the reality of what I was learning. When I returned, Ruth was studying me with sharp eyes. You're taking this awfully personal for a researcher, she observed. Most investigators maintain more professional distance. Jimmy looked up from his papers, then at my face, then back at the documents. I watched him make the connection in real time, saw the exact moment he recognized my bone structure, my mannerisms, the way I held my pen exactly like the woman in the old booking photos. Jesus Christ, he breathed. You're her daughter. Ruth's intake of breath was sharp enough to cut glass. Elizabeth Chen's daughter? The truth hung in the air like smoke from one of my mother's fires. I could deny it, make up some story about coincidental resemblance, but Jimmy's folder probably contained enough photos to prove the connection anyway. Yes, I said quietly. I'm Sarah Chen. Elizabeth was my mother. The silence in the activity room stretched until it felt like a living thing. Ruth's knuckles went white where she gripped her wheelchair armrests, and Jimmy's face cycled through shock, recognition, and something darker that might have been rage. Elizabeth Chen's daughter, Ruth repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. You came here pretending to be some kind of researcher? I came here to understand what my mother did and try to make it right, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I found her records 3 days ago. Every theft, every insurance policy, every family she destroyed, she documented it all. Jimmy stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. You've got some fucking nerve showing up here. Your comfortable little life was built on my mother's suffering, and now you want to what, ease your conscience? I want to return the money she stole. Money? His laugh was harsh enough to make other residents look over. Lady, your psycho mother killed 3 people. You think writing a check fixes murder? Ruth held up a trembling hand. Jimmy, sit down. Let her talk. Her eyes never left my face. You said you found records. What kind of records? I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken of Mom's files. Everything. Target assessments where she rated families by how likely they were to fight back. Insurance policies taken out weeks before accidents. Even email chains where she coordinated with accomplices. Jimmy snatched my phone, scrolling through the images with growing agitation. This is evidence of federal crimes. Why haven't you turned this over to police? Because I wanted to talk to the victims first. Find out what really happened, how much damage she caused. I met Ruth's eyes. Because I spent 28 years loving someone who was apparently a serial killer, and I needed to understand the scope of it before I destroyed what's left of my own life. Your life? Jimmy's voice cracked. You're worried about your life when my mother sits in this nursing home because the stress of losing everything gave her dementia? Ruth spoke before I could respond. Jimmy, hush. She's not her mother. The old woman leaned forward in her wheelchair. Sarah, you said you want to make restitution. How much money are we talking about? I have $127,000 from her life insurance and savings. But after talking to 12 families, I've documented over $400,000 in direct losses, not counting the insurance fraud or the medical costs from the poisonings. 12 families? Jimmy's anger shifted towards something that might have been hope. I only found 8. You have victims I missed? I nodded. Martinez Landscaping, Delacroix Family Bakery, Riverside Community Center. Riverside? Ruth interrupted. The place that ran after-school programs for low-income kids? She stole $31,000 from their operating fund in 2014. They had to cut tutoring services for 2 years. I pulled out my notebook. Jimmy, if you combine your research with mine, how many total victims are we looking at? He was already calculating, cross-referencing his folder with my notes. At least 20 families across 4 counties. Direct theft probably tops $500,000, but if we include lost revenue, medical costs, legal fees. He looked up with hollow eyes. We're talking about $2 million in damages, maybe more. Ruth's voice cut through the growing despair. There's something else you both need to know. Elizabeth didn't work alone. My pen froze above the paper. What do you mean? The electrical work before our fire, the insurance policies, the fake references, that level of coordination requires multiple people. Ruth's memory seemed crystal clear now, focused by urgency. I saw her talking to the same man 3 different times outside our shop. Mid-40s, expensive suit, drove a black Mercedes. Jimmy leaned forward. You never mentioned this before. I didn't think it mattered until now. But if Sarah's serious about exposing all of this, she needs to know Elizabeth was part of something bigger. Ruth's eyes met mine. Your mother was middle management in a criminal organization. And if they're still operating, finding those records might have put you in danger. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. Danger? Think about it, Jimmy said, his hostility shifting toward concern. If your mother kept detailed records of a multi-million-dollar fraud operation, those files are evidence that could bring down an entire network. The people she worked with aren't going to want those documents going public. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, we know you have Elizabeth's files. Stop digging or face consequences, asterisk. I showed the message to Jimmy and Ruth, watching both their faces go pale. Pack up everything, Ruth said urgently. Right now. If they know you're here, you need to get somewhere safe and call the FBI. But as I gathered my papers with shaking hands, one terrible thought kept echoing. If Mom was just middle management, how many other families were still being destroyed by the people she'd worked for? And how long did I have before they decided I knew too much? 6 months after that terrifying text message, I stood in the Pierce County Courthouse watching Marcus cut the ribbon on the official Elizabeth Chin Victim Restitution Fund. The FBI investigation had uncovered a fraud network spanning 3 states, but more importantly, it had frozen $2.3 million in stolen assets hidden in offshore accounts my mother had never told me about. This fund represents more than money, Marcus said to the assembled families and reporters. It represents acknowledgement, justice, and the courage of one person to choose truth over comfort. I spotted the Martinez family in the front row, David wearing a new suit and Maria dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Behind them sat Ruth Thompson in her wheelchair, flanked by Jimmy and 3 generations of their rebuilt family. Mrs. Patterson from Little Lamb's Daycare held hands with Kevin's parents. The little boy who'd been poisoned was now 8 and thriving, his medical bills finally covered. Detective Rodriguez approached as the ceremony concluded. Final tally came to 47 victims across 4 states, he said quietly. Your mother's documentation helped us recover evidence going back 20 years. And the other people in her network? Robert Kellerman got 15 years for orchestrating the whole operation. His wife Linda got 12 for the insurance fraud. 2 accomplices flipped and testified in exchange for reduced sentences. He smiled grimly. Thanks to you, they won't be targeting any more families. After the courthouse event, I drove to Meridian Restaurant where Marcus had prepared a celebration dinner for everyone involved. The private dining room buzzed with conversations I'd never imagined having, families comparing notes on rebuilding, sharing advice on small business loans, making plans for collaborative ventures. Sarah. Emma Martinez grabbed my arm as I passed her table. Mom told you about my veterinary school acceptance, right? The restitution fund covered my MCAT prep courses. At another table, Carlos Martinez, now 23, was showing photos of the food truck he'd purchased with his portion of the recovery money. Mom is authentic Mexican, he explained proudly. Opening next month in the downtown district. Jimmy Thompson appeared beside me, carrying a glass of champagne and looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. Mom wanted me to tell you something, he said. She's been clear-headed for 3 weeks straight since the fund was announced. Doctor says having closure about the auto shop gave her brain permission to let go of that trauma. How is she doing? Good days and bad days, but more good lately. She's been teaching other residents how to crochet. Apparently her memory for patterns is still perfect. His expression grew serious. I owe you an apology for how I reacted that first day. You had every right to be angry. Maybe. But you could have walked away, kept the money, pretended none of this existed. Instead you gave up everything to make it right. He raised his glass. That took guts. Marcus found me later on the restaurant's back patio, looking out at the city lights. Penny for your thoughts? I was thinking about something Detective Rodriguez said. 47 families. I turned to face him. That's 47 different versions of my childhood, kids who went without because my mother made sure I didn't. You can't carry guilt for things you didn't know about. I know. But I can make sure it never happens again. I pulled out an envelope I'd been carrying all day. The FBI is recommending me for a civilian consultant position. They want someone who understands how financial predators think, someone who can spot the patterns before families get destroyed. Marcus smiled. That sounds perfect for you. It means traveling, investigating active cases, testifying in court. Not exactly the quiet teaching career I planned. But I keep thinking about Mrs. Patterson at the daycare, how she blamed herself for not catching the theft sooner. Or David Martinez wondering if he was stupid for trusting a bookkeeper. I looked back through the restaurant windows at the families celebrating their restored futures. If I can prevent even one family from going through what these people experienced, it's worth changing careers. What about the house on Maple Street? Sold it last month. Donated the proceeds to the restitution fund. I'd walked through that house one final time, seeing it clearly for what it had always been, a monument to other people's suffering. I'm renting a small apartment downtown now. It's honest space, paid for with honest money. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then, you know what I realized today? When I sent you that first Facebook message, I wanted an apology. Just someone to acknowledge what your mother had done. Did you get what you needed? More than that. I got my family's story heard, justice for 46 other families, and... He paused, looking almost shy. I got to see what integrity looks like when someone's entire world falls apart. Through the window, I watched the Delacroix family, Marcus's parents, laughing with the Martinezes over dessert. His father looked younger than he had in the old newspaper photos. His mother smiled genuine for the first time in years. The bakery, I said suddenly. Are your parents going to reopen it? Marcus grinned. Groundbreaking ceremony next month. Delacroix Family Bakery, version 2.0. Dad's teaching me the old recipes, I'm bringing in new equipment and techniques. Full circle, just 20 years later than planned. I'd like to be your first customer. Actually, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white box tied with ribbon. I was hoping you'd be my first business partner. Inside the box was a simple silver bracelet engraved with coordinates, the exact location where the new bakery would stand. Marcus, I can't accept. It's not a gift. It's an investment opportunity. His eyes were bright with possibility. The restitution fund covers rebuilding the business, but I want to expand beyond what we had before. Catering, wedding cakes, maybe a second location. I need someone I trust to handle the financial side. I thought about my mother's meticulous records, how she'd used her gift with numbers to destroy rather than build. You want Elizabeth Chen's daughter managing your money? I want Sarah Chen, the woman who gave up her inheritance to restore what was stolen, helping me build something better than what was lost. The bracelet caught the light from the restaurant windows, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than guilt about my last name. Maybe I couldn't change where I'd come from, but I could choose what to build going forward. Partners, I said, fastening the bracelet around my wrist. As we walked back inside to rejoin the celebration, I realized that my mother had found me after all, not through Facebook messages or legal documents, but through the choice to face the truth she'd left behind. And in facing that truth, I discovered something she never understood. Real wealth isn't what you can steal from others, but what you can build together. The 47 families in that dining room weren't just victims anymore. They were survivors, thrivers, proof that some foundations are strong enough to rebuild on, no matter how much gets torn down. And for the first time since I'd opened that manila folder 6 months ago, I was genuinely proud to be a part of something my mother's victim had found in me.